Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about what kind of experience you should have, or maybe even credentials, before you start homesteading. Now, to answer that question, I need to tell you a little story. Actually, I need to tell you my story and how I came to start homesteading. So I spent the first 10 years of my life living in a big, very busy city, and the next 8 or so years living in a small northern town. My parents were young when they had kids. My mom was, she had 2 kids by the time she was 19. And so the best way I can describe my childhood, without going into too much detail, is it was very chaotic. My parents were young, and honestly, as I'm older and I think about it now, in those early years of having kids, they were still kids themselves. And so they had their own struggles and trials. So there definitely wasn't a focus on teaching us skills that I would bring into homesteading. We didn't have a garden, we didn't have animals, we mostly lived in low-income housing, apartments, townhouses, where we didn't have the property to have animals anyways, even if we had wanted to, though I'm pretty sure my parents did not have the desire to start bringing home farm animals. Here's the thing, when you grow up in a chaotic environment and you start dreaming as a child and as a teenager about your future and what career you're going to do, and maybe whether you're going to live in the country or the city, your dreams might seem small to others. You see, my dreams, especially when I was a teen, were not anything about homesteading and weren't even anything about a career. My dream was to move out of my home and own my own home and create an environment that was secure and loving and peaceful for my own children. And so things like homesteading, they just weren't on my radar. I did not even know what I wanted at that age, besides the fact that I wanted a place of peace and security and love. Copper, come. So I moved out of my house a month before I turned 17. That first year out of my house, I spent living with my friend's parents who had taken me in for a year. And then after that, I went off to college. Shortly after, I got married at the fresh old age of 20. And my husband and I never discussed living in the country. We never discussed homesteading. We lived in the city, and it just wasn't a strong desire for us. My husband had grown up in the country, but we were perfectly happy where we were. And then I had children, and as my children got older, I just had the desire for them to be able to run all over the yard. I wanted them to have a big space to run around. I wanted them to be able to have freedom in that way. I wanted them to be able to learn where their food comes from, and I wanted them to know how to garden and how to raise chickens. And so all of a sudden, this desire I didn't know I had started really welling up, and it just kept getting stronger and stronger. And so we started making plans to move to the country. Thankfully, my husband was completely on board, and he loved the idea, and he started getting the desire as well. And so we finally moved out here to the country 3 years ago. And when we moved out here, we knew nothing. I had spent some time reading books and learning about certain things in our last place, but we only had 1/11 of an acre that was completely covered in shade and deep tree roots, and so I didn't even really try gardening. I should have tried container gardening, but it just didn't occur to me. So when we came out here, we were living here for about a month, and I bought baby chicks, and that was our first introduction to homesteading. And we were very successful with the first batch. Not one of those chicks died. We were able to raise them up. But then we started gardening, and my husband dug a little patch for our first garden, and we didn't have a rototiller. We didn't have money to rent a rototiller, and there was no previous garden spot here, so we basically had to dig a patch in the grass. And I knew nothing, but we put some seeds in the ground and things grew, and it was really exciting. And so then the next following year, we made a bigger garden. And, you know, recently we've added the lambs, and we've made a cold frame, and we're talking about what we want to do more in the future. And each year we learn a little more. There are a few ways we've learned. We've learned by reading books, watching tutorials. YouTube is great for that. We've learned by asking friends. We have a lot of homesteading and farming friends, and they have been a wealth of knowledge to us, and they've been so willing to answer our questions. And you know, the other way we have learned is just by trial and error, and we've learned from our mistakes. And some of those were really hard mistakes to learn. You know, there was the time that we lost half our flock one night to a predator because we were free ranging and we left them out too late. We didn't put them back sooner. That was a hard lesson to learn, and the guilt I felt was tremendous. And those are the hard lessons you learn in homesteading. But you take that knowledge that you learned from your mistake and you apply it so that next time, hopefully you can avoid making the same mistake and you can improve as a homesteader. And so basically, my answer to the question, what credentials do you need? What kind of experience do you need with homesteading? The answer is nothing. Yes, you can be ahead of the game if you grew up in a farming family or a homesteading family, or you had some kind of knowledge or teaching, but even if you didn't, don't let that stop you. There is so much information at your fingertips, and if you are willing, then you can definitely learn what you want to homestead. And so my encouragement to you today is that if you want to homestead, just to start somewhere, start a garden, get your first batch of chicks. If you live in a city or a town and you don't have the property, there are still things you can do. You can learn to cook from scratch. You can still garden. And, you know, depending on your community, you may be able to have backyard chickens, or you could raise rabbits. So there's so many things you can do. And so my encouragement to you today is, if you want to be more self-sufficient and you want to homestead, to just do it. Thanks for watching this video, and until next time. Albert. Good boy. Good boy.